Well, Dale, this is Dr. Jester. I wanted to go over a few things with you on your Judaism paper. So, first thing we need to look at is the assignment and the specifics of it. So, you're to cover all the sections listed in this area and down below, and you're to do that in 750 to 1,000 words. So that means you have to be precise in everything you say. Choose your words carefully without becoming verbose, so that you actually have a paper that responds then to what you need to respond to. If you look right down here, the total word count on your paper is 3,800 words. That is basically 3 times over what you should have written. And so that's incredibly too long. And that's as bad as if you'd written 250 words. 250 words is insufficient. This is just way beyond what you need to have. So, in that sense, this very first part doesn't even need to be here. I've got all of this first part highlighted. You basically have thrown your original portfolio framework, your portfolio structure document in. You don't need this document here. The purpose of that original document was to explain why you're going to present your material and the way you're going to present it. This is all redundant here. It doesn't help whatsoever. So don't be placing that in the document. It's unnecessary. Second, if you're going to use a structure like this, these are all just headings. They provide no additional information. So if you're going to use these items, go ahead and list some things there. For example, if you want to talk about in section 1 the background and particulars, then you start listing some of the main points. For example, Jewish people believe that the religion basically started from Abraham and that Moses is one of the important lawgivers. There are the 3 commonwealths. Mention some of those. And if you're going to talk about subgroups, list the subgroups. Don't just put the heading in there, but actually list them. And then when you get down to the start of your paper, here's another problem we have. The whole document is in single space, and it should be double spaced. All academic writing should always be double spaced unless directed otherwise. So the very first thing you need to have is an introduction that explains the topic of Judaism and what you intend to say about Judaism, that you're going to look at the history, you're going to look at practices, you're going to look at sacred text, etc. Then the next thing that you need to do is make sure you have double space in the text. Look at this item right here. So I make a note here for you, but here is what I want to show you. So this is basically what you have. You've got your footnote coming after the word and before the quotation marks. So when you place those quotation marks, you're basically saying the number 1, the footnote, was part of the original quote, which it is not. The original quote ends with immortality. So what you need to have then is the quotation marks that end the quote and then the number that follows that. All of your footnote numbers have been done incorrectly, so make sure you correct those. Remember, the period ends the sentence, the quotes follow to show that it's in quotes, and then you have the number that should come after that. There's a number here, I don't know what it's for. This right here is again, no period is even there, you don't have that there. You've got a quote here, and then you say, this writer disagrees vehemently with this statement. My question then is, why did you quote something that you disagree with? If you're going to quote something you disagree with, then you need to have a counter quote from another scholar or more that refutes that original quote, and then you concur with them. Otherwise, what's the purpose of throwing in something that you disagree with? You've got a lot of groups listed under subgroups of Judaism that are not subgroups of Judaism. Islam is not a subgroup of Judaism. They trace their lineage certainly back to Abraham through Ishmael, but they would not be considered a subgroup of Judaism. They are their own religion. They do trace their lineage to Abraham, but that does not make them a subgroup. Christianity is not a subgroup of Judaism. It parted ways in the 1st century A totally different religion. Although it is born in a Jewish matrix, it does not have, and it is not a subgroup of Judaism. The only subgroups of Judaism, and these are carefully written in your textbook, and I would encourage you to go back and reread some of this. You've got conservative, Orthodox, and Reform Judaism. Those are the only groups you should be discussing there. You've got the sacred text of Judaism being the law or the Ten Commandments. In fact, the entire Torah, which is the law, that would include the first five books of the Bible, but it also includes the writings and the prophets. And you've got other works that are considered sacred, such as the Talmud and the Mishnah. And again, that's in your textbook on pages 70 through 73. And I do expect that if you're going to talk about these things, you have to consult the textbook. So you must be reading your textbook and throwing in some information related to that here. Here, fundamental practices of Judaism. You show no scriptural basis for any of that, so you need to include that. Major beliefs, you've got some of that. And then this thing just got so very large that it just literally wore me out. It's just way too much. So, right here you've got, in what ways is Judaism consonant with a Christian worldview? The idea behind this question is, in what ways do Christians and practitioners of Judaism agree? How are they similar? For example, they're both monotheistic religions. They both believe that God created the world and the cosmos, and that He's the originator of humankind, that they're made in His image, etc., etc. So looking at some of that, we share the Old Testament with them. So what are some views that we hold in unison with them? This paragraph, if you notice, it's indented completely to the left, or to the right half an inch. It should not be done so. Here, a whole new font starts. That again is a major formatting issue. And then again, it just keeps going. But here's the other thing I do need to show you. So anytime that we have a document been submitted to Lopes-Wright, you see your similarity index 5%. You always need to review those reports, because in your particular case, this right here is a problem. 32% of your document is quoted text. What does that mean? It means that basically you have 3,800 words, and that approximately right at 1,300 of those words are from quoted passages, whether from the Bible or from scholarship. So you've got way more quotes than you're supposed to have. This number should never be above 20%. When it reaches 20%, I always caution people to be careful that you don't go over that. When it reaches 30%, I require a rewrite. Now, since this is your first time doing this, I'm going to let that slide. But in the future, if it's at 30% or above, then you will have to revise the document. And that's a challenge to do, and it also is assessed a 10% penalty. So here are some major things. The technicalities, make sure you work on those for future reference. Make sure you have periods and quotation marks and footnote numbers where they're supposed to go. Make sure all your fonts are the same. Make sure you keep that within the guidelines of how many words you're supposed to write. Don't get wax eloquent and lay a lot of extra material in there. You want them to be very succinct. You want them to be brief, concise, so every sentence must count. You can't waste your time on a lot of things you want to go down. You can't go down rabbit trails. That's not the purpose of this. So you got to stick to the focus. And by all means, you did not consult with your textbook near enough, because there's a lot of things that are plainly written in the textbook that you don't have in your document. So you need to be focusing on that more. If you have any questions about the grade you're going to get on this, please let me know. I am always open to one revision, but any revision is a 10% penalty. Just be aware of that. But if you'd like to do a revision on this, I'm certainly open to that.